Hey folks, this is Melissa Ellison Dewey of Bobbin Boy, and this is this video in our series, the Woodturner's Apprentice, is about making a spinning wheel flyer. With the series, the Woodturner's Apprentice, in case you're new to us here, right now we're focusing on the making of various parts of the spinning wheel, but we will also be branching into hand tools, lace and tapestry bobbins, and also the restoration or making of chest sets and the other items, including things like pepper mills and stuff like that you might have made as a woodturner. So you're the apprentice, and we're here to teach you how to make a spinning wheel flyer. I want to tell you what a flyer is. This is a flyer assembly. It is composed of a metal axis that has an orifice on the end, a whorl that either twists off lefty-loosey or righty-loosey depending on who made it and when. This one twists off righty-loosey, so it's reverse threaded. A bobbin, the axle with the thread on the end for the whorl, and the flyer. Okay. This is an absolutely crucial piece of equipment. You cannot operate a spinning wheel as a flyer system wheel without a working flyer. And so the norm that we see in the situation that for the purposes of this video is what I'm about to show you. I do want to tell you that if your flyer looks kind of like this with the flat arms, it's a compound flyer, okay, and then a nice center, then in there, okay, the axle and the orifice. We're not doing these right now. If your flyer looks like this, we're not doing these right now. We are doing the traditional and vintage style flyers that could have been used with, even though these are threaded for the whorl, which means that it's at least flyer driven, if not double drive. I spin with double drive. The flyers are very much like this for your bobbin led systems as well. I refuse to say Scotch or Irish because that's just too UK centric for words. Alright, so what is the normal system? The reason it's UK centric is because there are numerous cultures other than the Scots and the Irish that had different systems. Double drive is what you want. Okay, here's your norm. You've bought a wheel, you're looking at a wheel, you're thinking about a wheel, somebody in your guild has a wheel, and you've got the whorl, you have a bobbin.
Or made one.
Or you can make one, because we taught you how last week, remember, Apprentice? But the flyer looks something like this, okay? And you can't work it, you cannot do this without the flyer looking like that. This is a broken flyer. This is your typical, this is what we typically see. We have fixed thousands and remade, replicated thousands of these, and typically of the antique ones, we see that it's broken off at the edge, okay, as it gets into this curve, right? And sometimes manky up here, but you work around that. You can't work around this, okay? Now, for the vintage ones, I do want to say that we normally see something different. This is a Country Craftsman by Franzek. This is not to pick on Country Craftsman. We just happen to do a lot of Country Craftsman work. The vintage flyers tend to be split right down the middle. And you can see that this one was. You see, and I'm going to turn it. See the glue line? It's glued because it's mine, and we use this as a model when we're making replicas for the Country Craftsman wheels. There's a reason that the split patterns are different from your broken off at the side to your broken in the middle. And that broke in the middle when I dropped it 1 foot, and it was a paradigm shift for us. There's a reason that breaks like that. For the vintage wheels, they sometimes went into a slightly larger axle and had a slightly larger hole there, and I'm not quite sure it was always mounted with a square the way that I'm going to discuss. But more importantly, they chose a poor wood that they didn't compensate for appropriately. They almost always picked maple because maple is widely available as a lumber wood, you know, in planks, right? And they would pick this maple because it's inexpensive and you can get lots and lots of it. Now, when you drill through you drill the hole through there, this becomes a very, very thin wall of wood, and a thin wall of wood, it's your thinnest spot. On the antique flyers we frequently see, because we don't know what they made these out of. Maybe they went and got themselves some maple too. However, they knew the trade better. And do you see how that is thickened? Get straight on. Do you see how that's thickened there and thickened there? That's to compensate for having to drill out the middle of it. Okay? Now, when I dropped this very flyer, and we finished with the language because it's split right in half, dropping about that far, okay? We started to think about it, and I grew up splitting wood for cooking, wood stove, grew up without electricity, and I know that maple is a fantastic wood to split, okay? You just wave the hatchet at it, and it splits apart. Well, what makes for a good wood to split makes for a really poor wood for a flyer, okay? Because that tendency to split on the straight grain is a weak spot that needed to at least be compensated for by the thickening, all right? The wood that we were using, I think maple once in a while, the woods that we use now for flyers after this broke and we started thinking about it are the woods that when they are seasoned, the grain gets hard to split apart. And so if it's not going to be fun to split once it's gotten seasoned, that's a nice wood for you to use for your flyer. We use hickory, is readily available in planks. Ash is frequently suggested. I think I've heard black gum. Somebody wanted to try black gum. Wear yourself out. Yellow locust, you can hardly split it by the time it hits seasons. As a matter of fact, I have a 25-year-old last piece of stump because I didn't know that, and so we use it as a seat now, and it sits around because I just couldn't get it. It's got all these marks where I was trying to get it, and it won't come apart. The fibers bind. That is a fantastic characteristic if you're going to use it as a flyer. Okay, why do we have this weakness? It is an inescapable weakness. If you have a flyer and you have wood, the grain of the wood runs, let's pretend these lines are the grain, okay, there's more of the grain. You know that wood has grain, and so it's got long molecules that run up it, all right? You either have to turn the grain that way, or you have to turn the grain that way. You don't, or you cut on the bias and compound your sins, but let's not do that. Okay, so let's pretend that you've only got vertical or horizontal. It has to be cut vertically because it is the least vulnerable, not perfect. It's an imperfect world. I've got bad news. And so what they do is, as you're going to see Alan do, they cut this flyer with the grain running up and down. Okay? And that means that it can split here, 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 here. Split like the Dickens right there if you're using a very splittable wood, and you've drilled it down the middle. You can split here, here, here. Well, gosh, that sounds horrible. I wouldn't want to do that. I'm going to solve all the problems that people couldn't solve for 200 years. Okay, well, no problem. So here's your piece of wood, and there are your fibers. But I don't want it to split at my axle, okay? I'm going to outthink these dudes. So I'm going to cut it like this. Alright. Now, when it lands on the floor, that you're just trying to do something and you drop it that far, it can split. I mean, it's going to be like a party joke. Everywhere that it goes from end to end, it can split. Okay, so you've got it's much weaker cut this way. So again, the cutting of it along the grain, up and down to the flyer, along the grain, it's what you have to do if you're using wood. And so what we try to do by the choice of wood is, rather than having the grain like that, we like our grain like this. So if it's good for a tool handle, like a hammer handle, or if it's good for a baseball bat, or you just can't split that sucker when you're out there and it's cold and you need that piece of wood, save it for a flyer. It'll be fabulous. Okay? Now, the situation these days, as I said, is that you, where's that daggone thing? You want to fix this for yourself, okay? Or you want to set up a little fixing gig for your guild, all right? Or you want to have flyers come in from all over the world, and you want to be the person fixing the world's flyers, and that's awesome. But you're going to have to use the method. You're not going to be able to mass produce. You're not going to be able to batch produce. You're going to have to make one-offs. And the reason is that the stuff that comes in from all over the world was made by different turners. And they didn't swear any oath at all that they were going to make them the same way. This is Scandinavian. These are German or German immigrants to here, or Irish. The German wheels were introduced into Ireland, and yet another of the woes that Ireland could complain about. Every flyer that comes in is going to be different. That wasn't the case, and it won't be the case for you if once you are no longer an apprentice, you set up your own wood turning shop, and one of the things you make is entire spinning wheels, okay? Because now you will be in much more a correct historical setting, correct in the sense that you're doing more like what the old wood turners did. They became a master, they became masters of their own shop, and they set up a profile. A profile, be it a bobbin, a flyer, a chest king, a pepper pot, okay, a doorknob, a Foley catheter plug, whatever it is, you made the same thing over and over and over, because that's what you would do. You're not going to art out on every single flyer that you make if you're producing spinning wheels. What you're going to do is what Alan's going to show at the end is you're going to take your profile, which is your reference piece that you make over and over and over, and you're going to replicate it. And so you might wake up Monday morning and think, oh, okay, I'm making flyers all week. Not, oh, okay, I need to make this flyer, and then I need to, for Melissa, and then I need to make 6 bobbins for Alan, and then I need to make 1 whorl for Patricia. You know what? That's what our business is, because we get these individual pieces that we're replicating, and that's going to be much the same case for you. And you need to at least know how to do the replication, even if you also go into batch production, which we're going to show you. So we're not quite in the situation here at Bobbin Boy, you with your guild, or whatever you want to do with this, fix the odd wheel here and there. You're not in the situation of the traditional wood turning workshop. The traditional wood turning workshop had its set of profiles they hung on the wall, and when you were going to make a flyer, you went and grabbed the flyer profile, and you made flyers all week, and it might be 6 months worth of flyers, okay? That's a nice situation to be in. It just isn't the case with restoring antiques, because you've got the work of people across hundreds of years, and not around the globe, but awfully darn close to around the globe. And guess what? They didn't standardize. Every one of them, as far as you're concerned, is unique. So Alan's going to show you now how to replicate this. It's come in. Melissa sent it. Melissa said, I love this wheel. It was my grandmother's wheel, but look, that's gotten broken. He's going to show you a way to do it, mainly discuss, a way to do it if you just have hand tools. And there's kind of a hybrid where you can do it with hand and small power tools, sanders and that kind of thing. And there's then there's the full-on doing it with the lathe. The lathe actually has a very, very small part in the replication of one at a time things. It had a large part when the old turners were making a 6 months worth of flyers. Okay? And we'll get to that. But I'm going to let Alan, at this point, take it away.
So, there is an element of accuracy required when you're reproducing a broken flyer like this. And as we said, we often use hickory, sometimes ash. So you get a suitable piece of wood that you're going to use for your flyer, and you're going to set it up on the board.
Does it have to be the exact same thickness as the flyer?
No, I'm going to start out with something that's a little thicker. It's a little bit thicker, but I'll take down the excess on the sanding plate, because it's fairly good for taking down the excess. So I'm going to let me get my square. I'm just going to check that the end of this is square, because part of getting things square and parallel.
This is a Carpenter Square, folks. Get one.
That's not bad.
Life will be good if you have one.
So I'm going to put this end against the end of the wood.
Exactly against the end?
Exactly against the end, or maybe a 1/16 in, to give me a little bit extra. And I'm going to make sure that this is parallel to the edge as far as I can see by eye. And I'm going to put a finger on there. I'm going to trace round this, and I'm going to give myself a little bit, using the pencil, thickness of the pencil, I'm going to give myself just a little bit more, a little bit extra.
You're not cutting the exact size, you're making it a little bit bigger?
I'm making it a little bit bigger because I want to allow for a certain amount of discrepancy creeping in here and there. And I'm drawing round this even though this isn't part of it, because now you have to take any existing hooks out in order for it to lay flat on both sides. And then I'm going to flip this over and orient it back in. See, this fly has moved and it isn't exactly square.
Wood shifts over time,
Yeah.
folks, so you just have to compensate for that.
Yeah, so now I'm just going to take a tape measure. It doesn't have to be one of these engineer's rules. It can be any kind of tape measure. I'm just going to measure there to there is just about 1 7/8. From there to there is about 1 7/8. So that should be.
So he measured from inside to inside and inside to inside to make sure that he had this centered around that. It needs to be centered because it spins around and around. Okay?
Yeah. Now I'm going to measure again. So I'm going to cut a square out of this to make it easier to handle. I'm going to measure across there, and it's 4 3/4. I'm going to measure across there, 4 3/4. Just let me check that. These have a loose end on to compensate for whether you're measuring inside or outside diameters, and you just have to be aware of that.
Or just use a rule or ruler.
That's right. So that's the square I'm going to cut out.
Why don't you just use the whole huge piece of wood?
It's just very difficult to handle on the.
And will it
on
fit
the
inside
bandsaw.
the harp of the bandsaw?
It might not. It might be too long. That's probably
Yeah.
too long, so that would cause problems.
Measure twice, cut once, folks.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Okay.
So let's go to the bandsaw.
Let me get I'm sorry. This is our back porch, folks, so...
Your bandsaw will have all the necessary safety guards on.
And Alan's will soon. We're going to get another one.
Bandsaw. Yep.
Now you're going to cut out...
Cut out the outside state.
Notice how he cuts in, folks, and then he comes and he's going to meet that cut. Again, he's going to cut oil, starting at the top this time. But when he gets down to where it's almost a right angle, there at the neck, instead of trying to make that turn, he's going to back out and then meet it that way.
I'm taking a bit of care when I come into the edge because I don't want great big cuts in there. Now I'm going to cut around the inside.
Now this is a fairly wide flyer, so the bandsaw blade should clear the curve. If you were doing something smaller, you might have to do it in a series of curve cuts and then straight cuts, and we'll show you how to do that when that time comes.
Yeah, this 1/4 inch bandsaw blade should be capable of cutting a good deal tighter than this.
So it's a 1/4 inch and how many teeth?
18 per
18?
inch.
18?
Per inch.
Okay. Alright,
Now I'm going to do a little test to see if I'm anything like even Steven, and it really isn't very good. So the old flyer must have moved, but that's not bad. That we can compensate for that.
now, you've got a bandsaw, and that's what you use, but how about if I didn't have a bandsaw, but I need a flyer?
Well,
what could I do?
I'd have to cut it all with a coping saw by hand.
How about a jigsaw?
You could use a jigsaw if you were good with it. So that I could cut this with a coping saw, no problem. I'd put this in a vise or something to hold it, and I would just cut round with the coping saw. So that would be tedious, but nonetheless it could be done.
Okay, now.
So now I want to mark and drill the central hole. And so I'm just going to put my finger like that and kind of get the centre of this. And put my finger there. I'm guessing the centre, but I know I can see it's pretty.
I want to show
pretty
people.
close.
Will you take the camera? And I'm going to show them what you're doing when you do that, because I never understood it when you were explaining it to me. It took me forever. I've done an apprenticeship, folks, and so I know what some of the questions are. What he's doing is, I'll just hold still right there, please. If I wanted to find the center of this, okay, so here it is. I could measure, all right, but remember I told you at the beginning, if it doesn't have to be turned into numbers, let's not do that, okay? So what Alan means is that he's going to kind of put the pencil close to the center by eye, okay? And he's going to get his finger, see that finger? It's anchoring against, just in a position. I'm kind of cramping my hand shut, so I'm going to do a line. Then I hold my hand as if it had frozen that way, and I'm going to do a line. And I hold my hand frozen in place and do a line. And I do that. Okay, and at that point, now I can see the center a little bit better. And it's going to be somewhere like that, okay? And so now I refreeze my fingers, draw a line, come over here to test to see if I'm close, and that's going to be my center. So whenever you see him doing this, because you know it ain't rocket science, okay, we do not have to land this on the moon. So whenever you see him doing this, and this, it's a very, very simple way to, the fixed reference point is the length of the pencil as butted up against the edge of the wood or whatever with your finger that's holding still, and you just hold still like that and mark, okay, and you will get your average center. So that's it. It took me forever to figure it out, even having it explained. Okay.
Okay.
So you've marked the center.
I marked the centre.
Why?
Because I want to put a little mark there to start the drill. If I don't want the drill wandering about.
He means drill bit.
Drill bit.
If he were American.
So I don't want the drill bit wandering about. I want it to go through there. Now,
okay.
I also, when I put this flyer on the pillar drill, I have a. Where's that square of this? Yeah. I have a jig, and it's just a simple couple of manky bits of wood, but it's square.
See how the Carpenter Square folks really do get one.
And that means that when I put
Careful.
when I put that on there, that will be held up vertical, so this hole will go through and come out in the middle, because I don't want this wobbling about and not being in the middle. I don't want it being off.
Yeah, centering is pretty important. The lathe will center a lot of stuff. When I replug that in, that cord's hanging down, and I'm sorry about that. I cleaned up. This is take 2, folks, and so I had to clean in between because that's how this stuff works. Okay, so what do you do?
So now I've taken a 1/4 inch drill bit, because I happen to know that spindle's a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to move this out of the way.
Because the flyer is too tall.
Yes. And I'm going to build up underneath this so that it comes up here, so I can get this in one hit.
So how do you do that?
I need some.
I put some wood over here.
Flat wood. Oh right, thank you. So there's one piece.
Is that going to work?
Yes. Yeah, that's going to work.
No, it's not going to work, not by itself.
No.
The answer was no.
Oh, sorry. I thought the answer was yes, darling.
No, the answer was no, darling.
Okay, so now.
Okay, so you're as close as you can get.
I'm close as I can get.
Why?
Because I've got to go all the way through that, and this is only a 2-inch throw.
Okay.
And I don't want to do it in 2 hits.
Right. all the way through.
And that's not bad for middle.
Okay. Okay, so you have to be able to drill that somehow.
Yes. If you do it by hand, that would be...
You'd really have to plumb it, yeah. So if you're good with a hand drill, you could do that, all right? But do try to get that squared. You want that hole going through because that's the center of your flyer, and this is supposed to be pretty much even around it. It's not absolute, but it needs to be pretty close.
Yeah. So this going to go through there. That's going to be cut. That hole is going to be cut square in a little bit with a file, and that looks a lot more central and nice and straight up the middle.
Now, what he's talking about. Take your flyer, please, sir. Is that your historic axle and orifice unit usually has a squared bit here. By bit, I mean section, okay? This section is squared. And so see how it looks like a little man with a top hat? That's your orifice part. Then it's a squared part, and then it's a rounded part, and then you got threading and stuff like that, okay? In order to keep the flyer from whirling around and getting loose, okay, they mounted it on this square section here. Because of the weaknesses that I discussed earlier with the grain, you don't want to push this round hole from the drill onto that square one. We do see cases where square pegs are put into round holes, but this is not one because you might split your flyer. Okay, so what Alan does is fixes this so it's already a square hole. Are we to that?
No,
I wouldn't. Oh, okay.
I'm putting the sand in place.
Okay. Now, for that, you're going to need a 3-cornered file. Okay, and that's a fairly essential piece, and it's not very expensive. Do you want to show them?
I can show that now if you like.
I bet.
Right, so now I brought the files up. Where did I put them? Here we are. So I've got 2 triangular files. Got a very small one if I needed to start off.
And look, folks, this is it. This is what you want. Okay, 3 flats.
Yeah. And what I'm going to do with this, I know that I would like the orifice to point towards the hooks, which are going to be on this side and on this side. So I'm going to...
Oh, right, okay. Wait, this is important, folks. This is more important than it sounded like that, okay? The orifice where the thread goes in, okay, as it's spinning, you don't want it to be just straight on. You want, see that hole? Put that hole at an angle to where it's kind of pointing at one of the corners. And as a matter of fact, just point it at the corner. You'll be right, okay? So don't just throw it in any old way, because remember, a square has a specific orientation, so turn it a little bit, Alan. Take the tail and turn it, or that. Depending on where you point that orifice, that depends on where you need to cut the corners for the square.
Now, very handily, I notice that the pencil marks we put on to square it are exactly where we need to put the files.
Well, that is nice, but then it doesn't always happen. So you could point that corner at that corner, and be in good shape.
I could mark them with the pencil as it stands now.
Yeah, but the main thing is, I mean, they're not stupid, but so that it's easy to make that mistake.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're going to get this, but I am going
to get that.
Start this with a small triangular file, and I'm going to file. And this does take a little while. This is making a round hole square. So you see I've started there.
And what he's doing, he's cutting in, and he's using that line, because just by chance it worked. Can you angle? Yeah, there you go. Be a little uncomfortable. Julia Child did this. She and her husband did one take for the old cooking shows. It had never been done. And Paul Child, her husband, while he's filing, I'll give you this little bit of trivia. Paul Child, her husband, who had been a diplomat of some sort and was quite interested in photography and stuff, kind of set his hobbies aside because it was obvious that Julia was so breathtakingly herself and so was capturing audiences. But he was the one that first came up in the 1960s for the PBS programs. He was the one that first came up with the idea. See there? We've ruined the round and it's becoming square. Paul Child was the man who first came up with the idea of shooting over Julia's shoulder or what have you, so that you were seeing what she was doing the way that she saw it, rather than doing it remotely like this, which is the way that stuff had always been done before, is, you know, and here he is filing the thing. All right. Well, instead, Paul Child, who did a lot of the filming for his wife, Julia, did it like this, and you could see it the way that Julia herself saw it.
So this is going to take a little while to do, because there's quite a bit of meat to come out here. And I did get some brushes to clean the rubbish out of the file. It makes it cut better.
And that's not something that everyone knows. Sandpaper, all cutting surfaces get what's called loaded up with sandpaper. Can you see? I'm sorry, we're getting a new camera. This is my phone. But you see how that's packed? Now brush that. Look, and isn't that going to cut better? I mean, you know it's going to cut better, okay? And he'll be doing the same thing with sandpaper later, if it loads up. So keep your cutting surfaces clean. They cut better.
So we're starting to get a nice square looking hole.
We show y'all all of this because we don't want to cut corners and that kind of thing, because you need to, I think that you learn better. If nothing else, you can like pour yourself a drink, but you learn better by seeing it as it's actually done, rather than our saying, and now though the round hole is square, you don't really know what happened.
So now I'm going to try that spindle in and see if I'm getting anything like, so that it will go in. And I see that it would go in at the top, but it's tightening up as I push it down.
That's probably the angle because you're coming at it from the outside. Yep.
Yeah, but it looks like it'll almost go.
It almost go. So you're doing this very empirically. You're just testing it as you go.
Absolutely. I can't think of a different way to do it.
No.
So I'm moving the file a little like that to make the corner more like square.
What do you mean?
Well, I want this. This is a right angle, 90 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
The file is a third of a circle. So you know,
good old geometry.
That's right. Those get you.
So you rock back and forth in order to square it.
I would like to get that larger triangle in, but
you mean file?
File, yes. Triangular file in. Just at the moment, it won't really go.
So sometimes we get flyers in, especially vintage flyers, that they didn't do this square. And what has happened is the flyer has come loose and it's spinning around. It won't stay on the axle of the flyer. What we recommend doing is exactly what you would think you might want to do, which is put a drop of glue in there. Get medium drying super glue. Okay, in other words, medium speed. So you've got 5 minutes to get your life straight. Put it on. Make sure your orifice, just in case that orifice hole needs to be aligned, make sure that's where you want it to be, and then put it on there, and it'll hold it. It should have been cut closely enough. It's probably just it's dried out with the air conditioning and everything, and you should be able to stabilize it on that axle. This never happens with the antique ones. We never get them in that are spinning around because of this cutting it to the square.
So we're still having to take a little bit more off, but now,
look at there.
Gosh, that looks like it would almost, that's the wrong way. What's to point this way?
Yeah, he's making sure that orifice is in the right direction.
Yes,
look at there.
Yeah, that's going to go
That's
in.
about going to do it because you want to tamp it on.
Yeah, now.
Because it is going to continue to dry, especially we are not air conditioned here. We're so far from temperature controlled, it's not even funny. And so we have to do things a little bit tightly in order to have a chance of them going into a drying situation and not coming loose.
Now, as I said, I started off with a piece of wood that was a good deal thicker than I really need. But I know that I can fairly quickly take off any extra. And the reason why I allowed a bit more was not only this is 4/4 of 1 inch wood, and that's the thickness it comes in.
4/4 means they're 4 quarters, like 1 quarter, 1 quarter, 1 quarter, 1 quarter.
But
that's
also,
the way people talk.
If this hadn't come up the middle, I could have compensated by taking more off one side than the other.
Just kind of by eye?
Plenty, yes, but plenty of meat. So now I'm going to 120 sandpaper on the disc.
What else could you use?
I could use a hand plane. I could use I could use a rasp of some description. I've got other rasps.
Let me show them this rasp because I actually am this is actually my rasp, folks. So I'm promoting. I've had this rasp for 25 years. Stanley has these available at Staples in the U.S. and they call them a shaver. I'm not sure that Staples is your woodworking place, but if you'll show them how you would. It's a very controlled.
This is
ancient, okay, but you can replace these surfaces. Yeah. That's called the sole.
Doing it all by hand would be somewhat tedious.
But you could.
Time consuming, but you could use various different machines. A planing machine. You could use some sort of handheld sanding machine like this. Really, the sanding plate, in my opinion, is the ideal.
Yeah, but if they don't have it,
you can put 80 grit on these.
Let's talk about the sanding plate again, very, very, very quickly. It is a face plate. You can order face plates for your lathe. Remember, it's got a screw on right, so get your threading right. A block of wood, and then this sandpaper, this pre-stick sandpaper. What does it have on it, Alan?
PSA, pressure sensitive adhesive.
Okay, so meaning that you peel off the back, and it's got glue, and you just whap it on there. Okay.
Now I'm just going to mark up.
See how he's marking again?
Down here.
So he's holding that finger still.
I've got this finger against there.
I feel like National Geographic, and now the Master Turner.
And it's this finger, not this one. Right, now...
Take two, folks, we get to that point.
Now you see I've got the mark so that it's much more close to the size, but also I've got a little bit more I can take off from the end. It's not very tapered, this, so it's not a lot. So here we go, bit of dust. Coming down to the pencil line. Look at that. There we are. I'm just going to unload the sandpaper with this it's rubber. Sandpaper cleaning block.
You can find it. I forget what it was called, but if you don't know what something is, because
crepe rubber.
Right, but you can always call your hardware store and say, "Hey, we saw somebody using a piece of something to clean up sandpaper," and that way, they're supposed to know. It's their job to know. Now, as you see, people, with the sanding disc, actual major shaping and taking away of wood. There you go, see it? It's going on. We're not sanding to make it pretty and shiny. We're using that surface in order to shape this. It's not what you think of as sanding. But don't forget, I told you, the lathe is one of those universal tools. All it does is turn. And so the outcome of what you get from the lathe is dictated by what you put on the lathe.
I'll put another disc on. These discs can be kept and used for other purposes later.
What other purposes?
For sanding things down by hand. Or on the lathe while it's turning. I mean, that's a pretty handy surface to be sanding on something.
Right. So you use it just as regular sandpaper.
PSA 120 grit, it could be 80 grit.
Don't go lower than 80 though. It's
a little bit too aggressive.
You're just chopping it up.
It isn't a bad finish on there. So where are we?
So are you going to make it thicker in the center, like all of those wonderful?
Well, I'm following this. I mean,
so
I'll
this
thin
one's
the ends.
not. That's right, but
it's a little bit.
It is thicker?
I'm going to thin you a little bit.
But if you were going to do one that was thicker in the middle, then you could shape that now, couldn't you?
Oh, I could absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, in fact, there is a little bit of shape to that. I hadn't noticed, so I can develop that.
Now he's making the tips of the arms smaller than they are at the shoulders, for example. And let me show you while he continues to work. See how that is tapered there and there? And it gets wider down here? That's what he's doing. So again, this sanding surface is a reshaping surface, not a finishing surface as it's being used here now. And now he's shaping that just a little bit thicker in the middle by pushing harder against, pushing like that so that it doesn't take off as much. You'll do this instinctively. And again, if you think of it kind of as a potter's wheel, where this is turning and turning and turning, and you're shaping what's there.
Now, I'm going to make this round on there, because you may not want to do it on the lathe. It can get a little bit hairy.
Okay, so if you don't want to do what Alan's going to do, okay, then what you want to do is you want to, again, this is a shaping surface, not a finishing surface, the way that we're using it here. So you can take the square, blocky cut of that and turn it into something very much like that more elegant neck.
The fly was mounted on the lathe and this was cut and finished, which can happen to this, but you can get a reasonable facsimile of that.
Right, you can get something that's okay. See, he's holding it at an angle. And working off the edge of that rather than on the flat. Taking out that cut that he did with the bandsaw by being a little bit over ambitious. Now you're going to clean up there at the end.
Okay, now the outside surfaces are all sanded.
And you could hand sand in oil and all of that.
Absolutely.
We use walnut oil. People ask all the time. You could use linseed, Danish. Any of the penetrating oils that harden when they dry are real good for wood.
A little bit of hand sanding.
Never hurt anybody.
Never hurt anybody, that's the absolute truth.
And you could hand sand the entire inside, couldn't you?
You could indeed, but I have to say I found these drum sander discs, what do we call them that? There's one.
Mm-hmm.
That's about 60
So are you
degrees.
going to do this?
Yes.
You are.
So take off this, put on the 3-jaw. This is the big 3-jaw that holds up to 3/4.
Now, you could absolutely use this drum sanding apparatus with a hand drill.
Yes.
Okay, a handheld drill would absolutely, he's doing it on the lathe, because again, the Woodturner needs to be in front of that lathe. Okay, so again, this is like what I told you. All of the tools that you can make the lathe run, it makes you that much better at the lathe, rather than going from this tool to that tool to the other tool.
Yep.
Do what you can with the lathe. And he's found these drum sanding things, attachments or whatever, kind of like sewing machine stuff, okay? He's got these drum sanding things, and he's going to stay right there in front of the lathe. He doesn't get to move. taking the edge off the corners, folks. Why not?
Now I've got another finer grit just to give it a nicer finish. 60 is a little bit aggressive, and that's probably about 120.
So that's twice as many grains per inch.
Yeah.
Square inch.
Yeah, or square something, square centimetre perhaps.
Is it centimeter? It might be, I don't know.
Yeah. It's 120 somethings to a something.
Which is twice as many as 60 somethings to a something. But again, you could do this by hand. You're going to have to binge some stuff on Netflix, but you could do it.
Yeah. Now,
And look there. You have got a flyer that you could have cut with a coping saw and hand finished, and you fitted it to your axle. But what you're going to need is you're going to need hooks. Okay, it's going to have hooks on one side and then hooks on, don't flip so fast, hooks on one side and then flip it over and put the hooks on the opposite side both ways, the opposite arm and the opposite face of the flyer. Okay?
right, so this is pushed
And you can fast forward to that.
pushed into the top of that square, and it's nice and central down the middle, and hopefully it's centered in there as well. So now I could mount this on the lathe with a reverse center. That's the center that goes inwards.
Which you're going to do.
To hold this end, which I am going to do, as a matter of fact.
So he's going to show you how to do this now on the lathe. This again is not the historic way that they were done. This is something that has had to be developed. Alan's a master woodturner, so he uses the lathe whenever he can. So he came up with these methods to make these, basically for us, they're one-offs. This flyer comes in and it's different from another flyer, okay? But the historical way they were made was in a batch production, which we're going to show you, a batch production sort of setting.
Now, I've got it.
Okay, so you've
running
taken
center here.
You've taken a 3-jaw chuck and mounted the orifice end into it. See there? That's the orientation, folks.
And I've also got a running center here, which is a hole drilled in it. You can buy reverse centers where they go inwards instead of outwards. And then we take this big center out. Oh, I'm sorry, where
I wanted a different angle. I'm pushing them around, folks. I know you find this hard to believe.
surprise. Lock that.
Tighten.
Round that in a bit, and just make sure you've got that nice and
Yeah,
steady.
always tighten everything up, folks.
So
and,
now-
and get that tight too. Don't let that drift. I've had that drift into because I forgot to tighten that.
I just want to see if I need to put some. That's pretty accurate. I can see that it's even. I could always run some super glue down there to tighten it. Doesn't need it, but it would tighten it in place. Now, I had a chap who asked me if I could make him a flyer out of carbon fibre, and I asked him why. He said because he spun at 3,000 RPM.
Yeah, but that's not historical.
However, I'm going to run this at 4,000 RPM. Now, I can shape, making sure I keep well clear of the arms,
Yeah, stay out of the arms, folks.
because it'll give you an awful clip.
Yeah, you'll have a
And
whack
you always
knuckle.
try to make sure we've got plenty of room.
Yeah, always test your clearances.
Plenty of room.
And test it all the way around.
Yep.
Not just at the thing. Don't just test it there, because how about if it slipped or something and when you came around it hit? Okay? It's going to go whack. You
So
don't
now
want it.
I'm going to shape this so it looks something
Okay, wait a minute. Let me.
similar to.
So it's
that.
got. So what are we seeing?
We're seeing a curve. We're seeing some grooves, and we're seeing it tapered down to the square. And I'm going to give some sort of approximation of that. It won't be absolutely accurate, but it'll be very good.
So he's staying out of the way. Normally we have our fingers draped all over the tool rest here. But in this case you don't want to. Stay back behind the tool rest because you know that those arms aren't going to hit that tool rest, okay? If the arms aren't going to hit the tool rest and your fingers aren't past the tool rest, your fingers won't get whacked. And I'm going to zoom up, Alan. Nope. Keep turning.
I'm hearing something. Oh, that's come loose. You've got to keep this tight.
So tighten. Right here. This moves this out right there. So see there? So he's tightening back up. Stay well back. And now, let me zoom back out.
A little bit of flat on there, but I'll let that go.
Okay.
So back this off. Take the plier out. And now we're to drilling it for the hooks.
Okay, so hang on. Let's see this because it's kind of like abracadabra. Look there, folks. There it is mounted, and there is its ancestor. All right, coming down on the flat, right? There you go. But it needs the hooks.
So I need really the bobbin.
We don't have a bobbin for it.
But we can tell from where the holes are on here,
right,
where they want to be down to. That's the last hole there, and the first hole is as near the end as we can get it. And we've got 1, 2, 3.
Can you
4,
turn this to the
5,
side of the
6, 7,
shadow?
8, 9.
Turn it so it's out of the shadow. Thank you. I know it's inconvenient.
So the last hole is there. The first hole is close to the end as possible. 1,
And you
2,
could just trace
3,
where each
4,
hole is,
5,
right?
6, 7, 8, 9. That's about right for most of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the same on the other side.
And then, so there it is, and it is going to, the other hooks are going to be there.
See
These
the
hooks are
orifice?
going to be there. These hooks are going to be there, and you put your orifice so that it points to those hooks or the other hooks.
So I'm going to run a line down the middle using the finger and pencil again.
There.
And then
Flip over.
run the line down the middle while I've got my thoughts straight. And I'm just compensating for the width of the thing a little bit, which you can do. Put this on.
So there's the first
Not
hole.
the last hole.
Or last.
Not the
First.
first hole. Second hole. Third hole. Fourth hole. Fifth hole. Sixth hole. Seventh hole. Eighth hole. Ninth hole. Now I
So
want
let's
to
show them again what you got. You got a centering line and you've got cross lines.
Yep, and I've got a pointy thing somewhere.
I don't know where the pointy. I don't know which pointy thing it is. Do you want a punch?
Yeah.
I don't know where it is.
Okay. Well, this will do. So I've got a point on here.
Okay.
And I'm just going to mark a little indent.
He's using a compass, folks, like 4th grade compass.
And I'm not going to put all the hooks in. I'm just going to
Yeah.
do some. So I'm not going to
Now
do the other side.
you're going to have to do the same, whether you choose, which for a vintage wheel is entirely appropriate, whether you choose to use small cup hooks, okay, or whether you choose to bend a nail, a panel nail here and do it, you're going to have to drill either way.
And how we do that, fortunately, if you decide to buy panel nails to make a nice authentic looking hook.
For the historic ones.
Well,
The vintage ones had the cup hooks, so that's authentic for them.
That's true. That's true. So these come in. That's number 16. I
Yeah, they
think.
come in gauges.
That's number 18 gauge. Now, the shop that you buy these from, say Ace Hardware here in America, for example, will also have wire gauge drills. Which
He means
the
bits.
Wire gauge drills, which means that the drill matches the size of the pin.
And he means the bit.
The bits, drill bits, yes. So
If you bought a number 18 panel nail, you would buy a number 18 drill bit, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Now I don't want to drill right through, but I want to drill deep enough. Now fortunately I've got this very short drill bit I've sharpened
What
up.
have you put it on?
It's on a Dremel, and this is a 3-jaw chuck, a very small 3-jaw chuck on the Dremel. And I'm just going to drill in and make all the holes.
Kind of like the dentist.
Yeah, I'm keeping my hands braced against each other. Keep this parallel to the surface.
See his fingers, people? They're forming a pivot. See? In, scoot, and in. Less tools, more skill. Okay?
Now, some of the old hooks had a flattened end because perhaps the hole was a little bigger than the nail was.
Get that toe. There we go. Sorry, folks.
You would just hammer that flat on the edge of a vise or something. However, what we're going to do is...
Now, if you were going to use cup hooks for your vintage wheel, you would just at this point carefully screw them in.
You would just screw them in.
Okay.
Like so. You've got to pre-drill.
You have to drill.
You've got to pre-drill.
You're going to split your flyer. All that work,
yeah,
and you're going to split it.
particularly at the very end.
Yeah.
But this screws in quite easily.
Okay.
You would perhaps use a slightly bigger drill. That was a little tight for screwing in, but you do need a clearance hole. So I need 3 sets of pliers. I need these round-ended pliers, which are a jewellery. They've got rounds because I'm going to make the circular part of the hook with them. And I need these smaller pliers just to grip, so you can keep the end out of the way.
Could you use 2 sets of needle nose?
Maybe. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grip this in the pliers.
Which end are you gripping?
I'm gripping the pointer, and I'm allowing enough in. No, the head's up here. I'm allowing enough into there so that it goes into the holes I drilled. Just enough.
Okay, so that's what's going to go in the hole.
Yeah, then I need that length. I should have cut a mark with a file on there, but it doesn't matter.
You haven't for 300 or 1,000 flies.
No. So now I'm going to form the hook.
Whoa. So, okay, you're going to have to do that again. That was way too fast. So point in.
Grip, nice and tight grip. Take this round pliers.
Slow.
And I bend that way.
One.
Back.
And then back.
And then back again. And that gives me the shape I want.
Hold still. Hold still. Okay, now bring it out slowly and show it in your hand. There you go, folks.
Do you want to see another one?
One more.
I'll do it quick this time.
No, you won't. Stop. They don't benefit by seeing it fast.
Bend. Right round.
Okay, there.
Okay.
Now back.
You see, it's not quite right round, but I can correct for that later.
Now
then I bend it back.
And now you tighten
finish it.
Up there.
And
okay.
Gives me
there you go.
Reasonable looking hooks. They're not exactly the same, but they're very, very similar.
Well, the old ones weren't the same either.
No, that's right. Well, and also this, where the holes are sometimes not quite even, that doesn't matter because, in fact, it's even an advantage because then on each side the thread's going to go onto the bobbin in a different place.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just sanding off the
virtue out of
pencil marks. Yes. Now I'm going to grip this.
How? Let's show it. So
just across there,
so the
little lost head nail is still up there.
Okay, so he's grabbing this part now in the pliers, and the tip that needs to go into the wood is sticking out, and in it goes.
And then I've modified these pliers by.
Okay, you're moving so fast and stuff is like getting out of the camera.
Modified these pliers so that I can get into the hook, like this. And then by putting my finger on the back of that so it doesn't bend, I'm just going to
squishing it up
press that in,
wood.
and that's nicely into the wood.
Okay.
Do you want to see that again?
Yeah, slowly and keep the surface here.
Right.
Okay, hold.
Grip it with the little head outside the.
Okay.
Grip these fairly tightly.
Don't flip and whip.
Then
in it goes.
In it goes, and we push it down
in
as much as we can.
As far as it can go. But look, wait. But look, folks, it's out of alignment, and it's not sitting down on the flyer yet.
So what I'm going to do, push that back with my finger a bit.
Just hold it in place, and then you're
It's
going to go
not
in.
gone in very far. Let me
Yeah,
just-
no, I don't think you muscled it in. No.
I don't think I did either. Right. Now.
Hold it still, go inside the hoop, and squish it.
And then
bend it down as you need to. And so on and so forth.
and so on and so forth.
Okay, so now if you had done that over and over and over, you would have a replica flyer.
Yeah.
And it is a replica because it is made to be, where's the original? Right there. It's made to be like this one, which is not like necessarily any other flyer arm in your guild. Now, if this were 1840, how might you have made this, Alan?
Well, of course, if I was working in a shop that made only one pattern of spinning wheel, then I would make a jig.
Okay.
And the jig would have 3 parts. It would have 2 outside shells, and it would have the part that was going to become the flyer on the inside.
Okay, so let's show them how this would work. So we're going to take this one out. This one's
one has
pretty.
been
He's
taken.
already done it. So he's going to unscrew the jig and show you what the pieces. The jig would be made. Get my drink out of the way. It looks like I'll get to have it in a few minutes. The jig would be made out of 2 pieces of wood. And you would keep using the jig over and over and over, and then on the inside of the jig goes the future flyer part that you sketched on. This is a piece of hickory. You would have sketched and cut. Sorry, you would have sketched and cut here, but you don't cut that inside piece out yet. Okay, so. Alan, if you want to, you could do this. What, do you have one?
Okay. I have one cut, a rough one cut.
Okay, good. So he's using a drill, but of course, obviously, you could use a screwdriver.
So there is the blank for the
This
flyer.
is what you're going to make. Okay, you're doing this all week long, and your first step would be to trace all of your blanks. Your second step would be to cut all of your blanks, like what?
Like this.
Like this.
A little bit bigger.
A little bigger, just like we did. Out of the way. That hadn't have any jack to do with it. So, pretending this is your profile, he's cut and traced that.
Well,
Okay.
that's the profile.
Okay, so he's going to make that.
You see, it's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, but we're not trying to replicate broken ones.
No.
So ignore the broken part. Pretending that that's the right shape, he grabbed that off the wall because he's going to make flyers all week long.
And I want to just point out that this flyer has a curve on the outside, and it's cut flat on the inside, and this is the reason why, because this curve,
Now hold still, don't keep going out of.
this curve comes because it was made on a jig,
Yeah,
and then the inside is cut on
Flat.
the bandsaw, because obviously you couldn't do that
right.
on the
Can't
jig.
curve that.
No. So now,
So you can tell when these jigs, and I'm going to do a little bit of debunking in a little while, because somebody that should have learned when to run their mouths, and to stop running their mouths when they didn't know what they were talking about, has come up with a myth about how these were made. But you can tell by that curve that the outside was turned on a lathe, the whole outside, not sanded, okay, the way Alan did, but turned on a lathe, whereas the inside is flat. So what he's done, now he went ahead and drilled this because we were prepping for the show, and he might pre-drill, but he probably wouldn't, okay? So this is the cut one, and one part of the jig, and you would use this jig over and over and over. All your life you might use these 2 pieces of wood, and you would put one on there, or one on whichever,
and I'm going to go
and he's got his screws started.
into those holes.
So start your screws first. And be grateful you have a hand drill.
Yes, indeed.
And go through enough. And this is a heck of a trick to learn right now, folks, is use the tips of your screws as orientation points for the piece that you're going into. Otherwise, you're going to keep drilling different holes into your jig. And you're probably going to be inaccurate, quite frankly. So show them how the tips have come through. See there? Have the tips of your screws coming through, because why? Well, you've already got holes. Put them on there.
Here we are. Now I'm
It's
just
in
going to put
place.
it against a hard surface,
I'm going to get my drink.
and I'm going to
And again, we know of turners that inherited not only the businesses from their fathers or uncles, but they inherited the actual jigs. And so this could have been something that you got from your dad if you're apprenticed with your dad. You know, you wouldn't have gotten it from another master if you'd apprenticed in another shop. But we do know of dynastic transferals of jigs as well as the business itself. Okay, so what you have is you have this mounted. This is going to be your flyer. And these are countersunk, and they're deeply countersunk. The head of the screws in there, because you don't want to be catching screws with lathe turning equipment.
No, quite.
He's just backing that out a little bit because we had to kind of wing it with screws, and so we used really long ones.
Yeah, that's all I had. These wire-sized drill bits, you can get them in boxes of 10 or 12. They don't last very long.
Are they for the panel nails that we were talking about?
And they come in the correct panel nail size.
Anyway, so if you get 18 gauge panel nails, you get 18 gauge bits.
Yeah. So I'm going to mark a centre again.
Look, there's the locked finger. And we're just looking for an average of the many marks that he makes. You're not going to find the center with the first one, but if you go round and round and round, all of a sudden, any of us would guess that the middle of that is the center.
Yes, indeed. Now I'm looking for that...
the elusive punch.
The elusive punch, yes, it seems to have gone.
Yeah, you might need to use the compass again.
Extremely elusive. I can't even find the compass now.
He normally keeps an orderly workshop and never spends any time looking for stuff that he set down randomly.
Absolutely. Well, it's here somewhere. I'm sure. It's hiding from me.
Right.
So I'm going to make a centre mark there.
So he's just using the metal part of the compass. And that's